Good morning. Did you remember to sit next to an intelligent person this morning? Or is there no intelligence left now? You've all drunk too much. Thank you for choosing to be here. I know there's a choice, so thank you for choosing to be here. This presentation, it follows on from my keynote yesterday. It is about the learning pit, the learning challenge, but I'm going to compress that for two reasons. One is to keep an eye on time. The second thing is, I'd like to say a few things about testing. I've heard a few interesting thoughts about testing in this weekend, and I would like to give a classroom perspective of how we can do it that is philosophically sound. So I'm going to do that in the last 20 minutes or so of this presentation. The learning pit, the learning challenge. Yesterday I was talking about the need and the how to get our students out of their comfort zone. We don't learn anything when we're in our comfort zone. We do. When you drive from home to work, you don't learn, you do. It's only when you get out of your comfort zone that you learn. And it's the same with our students. They need to get out of their comfort zone to learn. The problem is, far too many students feel bad about saying things such as, I'm confused, I'm stuck, I don't understand, I don't get it. Far too many of them feel that that's a bad thing to say, almost an admittance of failure. So, as a teacher, I thought I need to create a metaphor for saying those things without actually saying, I'm confused, I'm stuck. Now, of course, Vygotsky talked about it as the zone of proximal development. I don't know about you, but my students didn't seem to use that term very often. I'm just stepping into my zone of proximal development. Wish me luck. So I had to find an alternative. And that's why we created together the pit. Getting into the pit. Some people say to me, that sounds very negative, the pit. Why can't it be the mountain of learning? Well, that sounds lovely. But when I'm at the top of a mountain, I feel a sense of achievement. I feel great. I can see for miles around. I don't know about you, but that's not how I feel when I'm out of my comfort zone. I feel a sense of trepidation. I feel like this is hard, I don't know what to do here. And so that's the sense that I wanted to create. And it's okay to feel that way. Last week, I was touring Scandinavia with Carol Dweck. Many of you will know her name from the book Mindset. She has created this idea of fixed and growth mindset. And we work together regularly. What she's talking about now, that is different from before, is, she says, do not talk about the fixed mindset as if it is a terrible thing to admit. Actually, own it. In fact, she said, name your fixed mindset personality. Name a character. Think of a character, part of you, that you get into that sense of, I can't do it, I don't want to do it, I'm never going to be able to do it, I'm going to fail at this. And we all have that inner voice, and we shouldn't say, that is terrible. We should actually say, it happens to me. It happens to us all, and let's name it. So give your fixed mindset a personality. Give it a name. And say, oh, there she goes again. It's almost, she's recommending schizophrenia, I think. But you talk about that, and that's what I wanted with this pit. To say, you know what? It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to be fearful. It's okay to be filled with trepidation. In fact, actually, another thing that Carol Dweck said is, saying that I am always in a growth mindset is one of the most fixed mindset things to say. Because we're not always in a growth mindset. And no matter how we try to tell everybody else, we don't always love being out of our comfort zone. If you have lots of experience of teaching 6-year-olds, how willing would you be to go and teach the 11 to 18-year-olds for a month, see how you get on? But if you teach history to teenagers, how would you like to spend a month teaching 5-year-olds? Good luck. You'll be herding cats. But what do we tell ourselves about being out of our comfort zone? And the thing is, let's not pretend that we are super excited. Let's be clear, let's be honest with our students and say, you know what? It does feel worrying. It does feel, you do get nervous. You do feel as if, oh, hang on a minute, can't I just stay here? Let's name it. Let's talk about it. And so that's what I wanted to achieve with this idea of the pit. I'm in the pit. It's rather surreal that if you do a search online these days for the learning pit, last time I did that, I found 3.5 million results. There's a lot of pits out there. There was one post that I saw recently, was posted, shared more than 4,000 times. Unfortunately, I don't like that image of the pit. The reason for that is, notice it starts and finishes at the same height. And I think to myself, why would you go through all of that pain just to finish at the same point? Why would you do it? If you came across that, how many of you would just put a bridge over the top and walk across? So if you're going to draw the pit, make sure it finishes higher than it starts. Because the point is, you're going in with a lower level of understanding. It's a small amount of knowledge, and then you go through the pit, you examine lots of ideas, you explore, you look for questions, you look for contradictions, and then what happens is you come out with a much greater understanding of the pit. My favorite example, a school in London about 6 months ago said, would you come down to visit us? We heard you talking about the pit years ago, and it's transformed our school. We'd like to show you around, and then we'd like you to work with our teachers afterwards. So off I went. They said, let us show you around. As I was walking along the corridor, this is what I came across. I said to the boy, are you okay? He said, yes, thanks. I said, what are you doing? He says, I'm in the pit. I says, I can see that. It was actually a jacuzzi that they haven't put water in. And I said, what does that mean to be in the pit? He says, it means you are confused, that you're thinking deeply about something and you don't quite know what to do. I says, okay. So why do you come and sit in this? And here was the brilliant answer. Because it means, leave me alone, I'm thinking about it, I'm trying to problem solve now. Brilliant. It wasn't, come and rescue me. It was, leave me alone, I'm thinking deeply about it. Do your students have a space to do that? And it doesn't have to be a jacuzzi. But do they have a space in the school, a space in your classrooms where they are able to deeply think about something? Some students are lucky enough to have that space at home, but some live in much more chaotic, busy homes. And when you really want to deeply think about something, how welcome is it somebody coming along says, "Can I just ask you a question?" You just think, leave me in peace. To deeply think about something. And that's what this school are doing. I am delighted to say that we've just managed to get a new website up and running, thelearningchallenge.co.uk. It's in English, entirely in English at the moment, but there'll be a Spanish version, a Swedish, Danish, Norwegian versions will be released soon enough. But if you go onto that website, learningchallenge.co.uk, you'll find lots of resources, lots of ideas. You'll find that video of Grace singing that I showed you yesterday. That's on there. There's an animation of me explaining about the pit as well. So that would be worth looking at if you find this to be useful. There's also this new book that has just come out a few weeks ago, The Learning Challenge, and in there I describe the sorts of concepts, the ideas that you can start your students with, how to create that confusion to get them into the pit, how to help them to solve problems, to build ideas and answers within the pit, how to come out, what you can do about students with special needs, how this works with them, and then lots and lots of examples of how to do it. Here's a very quick, brief overview of the pit. Typically, there are 7 steps. Those of you who heard me talking about feedback yesterday, you'll notice I like 7 steps. Always try to create 7 steps. My favorite lesson plan was the 7-step lesson plan. Do you know that one? That's the lesson plan you make in the last 7 steps before you open the classroom door. But that's another thing. The learning challenge is about identifying something that you want the students to think about, and then it's seeking out the problems. It's seeking out the wobbles that I talked about yesterday. It's creating a sense of cognitive conflict in the mind so that students are thinking more. And then as they are in that sense of confusion, what skills, what strategies can they use? What can they learn? How can they come out of that pit? In fact, a few years ago, I was presenting at a conference, and Edward de Bono was the other keynote speaker. You know Edward de Bono, the guy who created 6 Thinking Hats, and Plus Minus Interesting, and the court materials. And he said afterwards, the best place to teach lateral thinking, creative thinking, is when students are in the pit. Don't do it when they think it's easy. Do it when they're challenged. Do it when they're wobbling, because then it makes it real life. Then it becomes part of who they are, that I can problem solve my way out of this. So, generally, the pit begins with a concept. A concept is an idea. A concept is something a theme that you're going to be thinking about. The boy in the pit, I asked him, well, what are you studying then? And he said, we're studying rationing during the war. And I said, what's that about? He said, it's about food and having enough food for everybody. So I asked, well, what is food? And he looked at me as if I was rather strange. But I knew that food is a concept that we could get students into the pit with. If I were to ask your students, what is food? What would they likely say? Something you eat. Okay, food is something I eat. So what I need to do now is create a sense of confusion to think, hang on a minute. So let me ask you this. How many of you have ever seen students do this before? Oh. You're probably thinking, I've seen teachers do that as well, but If a student picks their nose and then eats that bogey, would that class as food? You have got 1 minute to talk with the most intelligent person you can find to make a decision. Would it count as food? Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let me pause you there, please. So, we're going to take a vote. You have 3 options. The question is, if a child, and we'll stick with children for now, if a child eats a bogey, would that count as food? Your options are either yes or no, or not sure, I'm feeling nauseous. Raise your hands for yes, it would count as food. Look at these nose pickers of the world. Proud of it. How many would say no? Okay, the vast majority. How many are saying, I really don't know, I don't care, I don't want to think about it? So, what is food then? If it's not simply something we eat, what is food? A source of nutrients. Yeah? So, if it has no nutrients, does that mean it's not food? For example, fast food. Not a lot of nutrients in fast food. Does it have to have nutrients to be food? It would often, and we would hope, but does it have to have nutrients? You're saying yes. He's sticking to his guns here. Do you have to actually eat it for it to be food? Let's say you took an apple, and an apple sits on your windowsill, and you don't eat it, and it over time starts to rot. At what point does it stop being food? When it goes into the soil, is that no longer food? Is it anything that you can put into your mouth? I'm not going to ask you what you put in your mouth, but what is food? Is it energy? Does it have to give you energy? Not necessarily. You have got 1.5 minutes to create a definition of food that you think nobody else can challenge with your partner. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let me pause you there, please. So, how many of you, whilst you were trying to define it, how many of you were saying, yes, but then there's this, and then there's that, but that doesn't work because here's an example. Be honest, if I had asked you before we began, write down the definition of food, how many of you would have been challenging and questioning each other? Now, you might have been thinking, why is he doing this? But the chances are you would have written a pretty straightforward answer. Food is something we eat that keeps us alive. But the moment we create that wobble, the moment we get our students out of their comfort zone, the moment you are thinking, but what about this, and but what about that, then what happens? You start to think more. You start to identify the problems, not just problem solve, but problem identify. And that's what we want our students to do, isn't it? That's what this is. You start with something that seems relatively straightforward and easy. Then you try to find the contradictions. You take them from where they think they know what it is, down into the pit where they're going, oh, this is hard. It's about creating cognitive conflict, and that's not where you and I are disagreeing. That is where you disagree with yourself. Cognitive conflict is where you've got at least two ideas in your mind at the same time. You agree with them both, but they conflict with each other. So an example might be, I think that stealing is wrong. I think that Robin Hood was a good man. Contradiction. Food is something you eat. Not everything you eat is food. Or food is something you eat, but you don't have to eat it for it to be food. Contradiction. We're trying to create that because that creates the wobble. That gets the students thinking more. I was visiting a school, secondary school, and there was some 12-year-olds. I said, what are you studying? They said, tourism. I said, okay, that's interesting. What's a tourist? And they said, a tourist is someone who visits another place. And I said, like me, I'm visiting your school today. And one of them said, no, you have to be having fun. I said, I am having fun. And I overheard one of them say to the other, he's weird, isn't he? Said, come on, no, well, tourists have to take photographs. If I take photographs around your school, would that make me a tourist? And then, no, you have to go on a tour. I said, your principal has just given me a tour of the school. Am I there for a tourist? No, okay, but you have to be on holiday. You're not on holiday, so you're not a tourist. I said, you've just finished the summer holidays. You had all those weeks off in the summer. You were on holiday. Were you always a tourist then? And they're like, oh. And then someone says, why don't you tell us what a tourist is? And I said, I don't know. And one of them says, I don't mean to be rude, but why are you teaching us then? I said, but how could we find out? They said, well, we could find somebody who actually knows. I said, well, good luck with that one. Or we could look online, or we could go and look in the books. I said, okay, I'll give you 20 minutes. Go do your research. Go and find out as much as you can. Come back and we'll see where we go from there. The teachers who were watching that lesson said those students were so much more engaged in research than normal. Normally, they say, the students go off, they go online, they find the first thing about tourism or whatever it is they're studying, they download it and they hand it in. Instead, with this group, they were saying, see, I told you a tourist is someone who goes on tour. And another one said, yes, but we could go on a pub crawl. 12 years old, you know, but British, so there you go. We could go on a pub crawl, and that's a tour, but we wouldn't be tourists, would we? And someone said, oh, yeah, but you have to go abroad. You have to go to another country. And someone said, no, you don't. You could be a tourist in your own country. You could go to the local museum, and you'd be a tourist. My favorite one was one of the girls said, I know you are a tourist if you think you're a tourist. Mm-hmm. At which point her friend said, hang on a minute, though, I've just been on holiday with my baby sister. She's only 2. She doesn't think anything at all. She was a tourist, but she didn't think of herself as a tourist, so was she a tourist? And the kids go, oh! How many of us have spent hours trying to get students to question what they read online, question what they read in a book, question each other? And that's what this is. It only took me 2 or 3 minutes to get them in the pit and then send them off. In fact, I would never send students off to do research unless I've got them in the pit first. We've got to create that wobble before they go and think about it. Working with some 6-year-olds. What are you studying? They said, odd numbers. I said, oh, that sounds interesting. So what's an odd number then? They said, an odd number cannot be divided by 2. The 20 teachers sat at the back. How proud they looked. So I says, okay, 5, that's an odd number, isn't it? What if I've got 5 cakes and I share my 5 cakes with your teacher? How many would we get each? And they said, she will get 3 and you will get 2. And I said, why? And they said, because you're a gentleman. I said, no, I'm not. I want my fair share. And they said, all right then, she will get 2 and you will get 2. I says, what will you do with the last one? We'll keep it for a friend. I said, come on, what would you really do? And they turned round to the teachers as if to apologize for what they were about to say. They leaned forward and they said, we'd cut the cake, really. I said, so you can divide 5 by 2, can you? And they said, yeah. I said, so does that mean 5 is an even number then? And they went, yeah. All the teachers at the back going, oh, bloody hell. 2 weeks' work down the drain. That was not the end of the lesson. That was not, right, okay, you're confused, off you go. Mind you, when I work with secondary students, that's often what I try to do. Get them in the pit and then send them off. Get them in the pit at the end of a lesson, ready for the next lesson when we're actually going to think about it. To get them confused, to get them wondering, to get them thinking, and then send them away. And you know what? They come back at you the following week or the following lesson. Well, I was thinking about it, and isn't that brilliant when they do that? With the younger kids, we normally get into the pit and we explore it together, and then we climb out of the pit together. So, what happens then? By being in the pit, they start problem solving. They start thinking more together, as you were when you were defining food. You started thinking more together. There was this sense of, we need to solve this. And after a while, and notice I'm being purposefully ambiguous when I say after a while, because it might take 10 minutes. It might be days later. But after a while, some of the students come out of the pit. In other words, some of them think, I know, I've got it now. In that 6-year-old example I've just given you, after about 20 minutes of them being really confused, this little boy said, I know, it's like odd socks. And I said, what do you mean by that? Thinking he might talk about a green sock and a red sock or something. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, my grandma says that no matter how many socks you put in a washing machine, you always get an odd number out. Oh, wow. So what do you think grandma means by that? And he said, well, socks come in pairs, don't they? So you get all the socks out and you pair them up. You take them, pair them, take them, pair them, and right at the end, there's always one left over. It's like that, isn't it? And then someone else said, yes, but you could cut that sock up and then tie it. And he looked and he went, no. If you took one sock and cut it up, you wouldn't have 2 socks. You'd have a broken sock. I says, but if you cut a cake, it wouldn't be broken, would it? So then they started thinking about it more, and then they said, okay, an odd number can be divided by 2. But to do it, you'll have to break one of them up. You can, with an even number, you don't have to break anything. One for you, one for me, one for you, one for me. But with an odd number, that last one, you have to break it up to share it. So it's not the original, it's not the whole thing again. Great answer, eh? Those are 6-year-olds piecing it together. What happens is they come out of the pit. Now, I noticed some of you were not looking at the screen then, and it took me about 45 minutes to get this 3 to do this. So can you watch and be impressed? Are you ready? Da-da-da! Tell you what, that was good, wasn't it? Thank you. That's the sort of applause you give to 3-year-olds. Ah, bless them, aren't they cute? Ah, sweet. But thank you anyway. So, they move from being confused to, I know, I've got it, I understand it, and then they explain it to each other. And that's really powerful when they are explaining this to each other. It's about moving from a sense of knowing lots of things to coming out making meaning. Notice the light bulbs. In the knowing lots, each cord is separate. When they're coming out, now they're connecting. Now they're making links. Now they're thinking, okay, I get it now. And they are making meaning together. It's not they are being given that information. They are making meaning. Those of you who heard me talking about solo, the solo taxonomy yesterday, and I was talking about that in my keynote about don't be a Kodak teacher. This is moving students from knowing lots, which is surface level, to understanding. It's that deep level thinking, understanding. Now, when you've tried really hard to understand something and then you get it, how does that feel? That feels great, doesn't it? That is the eureka moment. Now, about 10 years ago, I used this exact same analogy. I said the eureka moment at a big international conference. And then I said the eureka moment, at which point there was a woman on the front row, jumped up. She says, I've just got married. And I'm thinking, I'm really happy for you, but please sit down. She says, I've just got married to a Greek man. And I'm thinking, where is this going? She says, I've just got married to a Greek man, and so I'm learning Greek. And eureka is Greek for I found it. I thought, I bet you have, but I didn't say it. I found it. It doesn't mean my teacher gave me the answer. It doesn't mean my friend did it for me. It means I found it. And when you get that sense of eureka, what do you want to do with it? Share it. How many students around the world go home every day and their parents say, what did you do at school today? And they say, try shutting them up if they've had that eureka moment. They will be, and when they come back to school the next day, what will they want? More. And here's the absolute key to it. Will you get that sense of eureka if you haven't first struggled? If I said, what is food? And you said, food is something I eat. And I said, very good, well done. Is that the eureka moment? Of course not. We have to struggle. We have to wobble. We have to be, oh! We work at it, we keep going, and when we come out of the pit, that's when we get that eureka moment. And that's what makes it so worthwhile. And we listened to Javier earlier talking about Pisa, talking about resilience. If this doesn't build resilience, what the hell does? That boy in the jacuzzi pit, I'm here to think deeply. It says, leave me, I'm working it through. That's resilience, isn't it? That's not, help, I'm stuck, give me help, teacher. It's, I'll keep going with this. And it's also teaching them the skills to do it. What you can then do is use it as a metaphor in your classroom. How many of you are out of the pit? And they put their hands up. How many of you are still in the pit? They put their hands up. Right, pair up. If you are out of the pit, it's your job to try and help those who are still in the pit come out. Mind you, if you are still in the pit, it's your job to try and drag them back down into it. Don't let them get away with easy answers. Question them. Challenge them. Okay, Let me share a couple of quotes just to finish this piece about the pit. A couple of quotes from students who have been using the pit a lot in their school. What I didn't like about learning before we had the learning pit was when you failed, you thought you were really bad at that lesson and you didn't want to do it again. But now we know about the learning pit, we all know it's okay to struggle because that's when you learn most. I used to get upset if I got a wrong answer or made a mistake, and I would be scared to tell the teacher. But now I know the teachers will be happy I've tried different things and gone into the pit. They'll spread it with the class so that it will help other people who have made similar mistakes, and it will help everyone in their learning. Do you remember yesterday morning I was talking about how do you respond to mistakes? Do you go and quietly, privately help them to correct it? Or do you say, brilliant mistake, let's share it with everyone? And most people in our profession, when I suggest that, they say, our students aren't ready for that. We can't do that second thing because they would feel it is belittling them or making fun of them. And that's exactly what the teachers in this school thought until they started using the pit, and now look at the attitudes. We want teachers to share our mistakes with others so we can all learn. A couple of quotes from parents of children using the pit. This year, I have noticed a massive change in my daughter. She used to be so quiet and do things just to be praised, but now she is happy to take risks, make mistakes, be bold, and go into the pit. My son has always been very, very negative about everything, but now I'm in the pit comes out a lot. He now knows that if he keeps persevering and keeps trying, that he gets better. It is definitely changing his view on things. And my favorite quote of all, my son told his dad he was in the pit because he couldn't cook dinner. For me, it works. It doesn't have to be a pit. It could be anything, so long as your students and you have a shared language, a shared code, as it were, for making this sense of being out of our comfort zone okay, normal, what we're aiming for, where we learn. How are you going to get your students talking and thinking like that? That we want to be out of the comfort zone, we learn more, and we can learn together on that. Okay, so I said I would talk a bit about testing, because I've heard some interesting comments about testing. Let's get rid of testing. We don't like testing. Could I ask you, Alfred Binet, does anybody know what his contribution to society was? Alfred Binet. Very good. He created the first ever IQ test. Now you might think, let's go boo. But please don't, not yet. Alfred Binet was asked by the education department in Paris in the late 1800s to work out how to identify which students were not making as much progress as others. Because they thought if they knew who those students were, they could put additional resources, they could change the way that teaching happened for those students so that those students caught up. Based on the very egalitarian principle of every student deserves to learn. Every student deserves to make superb progress. And when Binet published his results, he was adamant that a test tells us one thing, and that is what a student has learned to that point. That's it. It does not mean this is how intelligent they are, or how intelligent they could be. It purely tells us what they have learned to this point. If we all took a test in Spanish right now, I'm going to assume I will come bottom. Does that mean I am stupid? Don't say yes. Thanks very much. Does it mean I could never learn Spanish? Does it mean I will never be good at Spanish? Or does it show I haven't learned any Spanish yet? So, Binet said, some recent philosophers have given their moral approval to the deplorable verdict that an individual's intelligence is a fixed quantity, one which cannot be augmented. We must protest and act against this brutal pessimism. It has no foundation whatsoever. So what went wrong? Some years later, the United States government paid Stanford University a huge sum of money to find a way to ensure that only the right people could live the American dream. Who do you suppose were the right people? And who do you suppose were the wrong people? So, Stanford University took Binet's work and changed it into the Stanford Binet test. Binet rallied against it, complained bitterly, tried to get his name removed from it, but he was a lone voice against the power of Stanford University and the United States government. And here's what Lewis Terman, who led that group, did. They gave a test to English speakers, white English speakers, and to non-English speakers, black non-English speakers. And guess what they proved? And you can still find their results online, showing the normal distribution for white IQ and the normal distribution for black IQ. And they proved white people are smart, black people are stupid. And that became one of the justifications for apartheid. It became the justification for separateness, for separate schooling, and it also changed people's concept of intelligence. It led to a typical belief that either you are smart or you are not. Either you are clever or you are stupid. Either you are musical or you're not. And it became pervasive. What do you think so much testing is based on today? Binet or Stanford Binet? Because Binet said, tests are the starting point. Stanford Binet says, tests show you what they can do. So how does this play itself out in the classroom? Let me ask you this. This is a spellings test for 6-year-olds. And let's say the boy in the picture gets all of them right, gets 10 out of 10. Please raise your hands if you would praise him and say, very good, well done for getting 10 out of 10. Raise your hands in the air. How many of you are hesitating, thinking that sounds like a trick question to me? It is indeed a trick question. You remember those 2 paths I told you about yesterday? What if that was the easy path for him? What if it was really easy? What if he didn't even have to think about it and he just got them right like that? And we say, very good, well done, clever you. What does he now think? I'm smart. He also starts thinking what the teachers value is us getting it right. They don't care how, they just want us to get it right. Why on earth would he now ask for more challenging stuff? Because he's just been praised. But what if it was the challenging path? If it's challenging and he got 10, he deserves praise, doesn't he? But how do we know? My advice to you would be get rid of tests. Yeah. And introduce twice as many tests. Nobody's cheering right now. Please do not give a test. Just do not give a test unless you give the pre-test first. So then you can look at what matters. Let me show you how that would play itself out. Right then, kids, next week we've got a spellings test. Let's have a practice now, shall we? Number 1, boy. Write it down, please. Number 2, toy. Why aren't you writing them down? And the kids say, oh, because we haven't learned them yet. And I'll say, I know you haven't learned them. This is a practice to find out how many you know at the moment. So come on. We had boy, toy, enjoy. Make an interesting sentence from those 3 words, couldn't you? Oh, come on, it's the weekend, for goodness sake. Anyhow, you go through the list there and then you show them the right answers. And you let them mark them themselves. And this, bear in mind, is the pre-test. This is not the actual test, this is the pre-test, to find out how many they know at the moment. So let's say in the pre-test he gets 4 out of 10. I think fine, he's still got 6 more words to learn. It's a bit of a challenge. But what if he gets 9 out of 10? Is it much of a challenge to go and learn 1 word in a week? So what do we say? Wow, you're finding this really easy. Let's give you something more. Now, I know those of you who teach teenagers will probably be folding your arms right now, saying, yeah, right. Because you know what teenagers will do, don't you? They'll work out this system very quickly, and what they'll do is they'll get everything wrong on purpose so they don't get the hard stuff. If that's what you think they're doing, call them on it. Say, all right, if you like easy stuff, I can get you easy stuff. I'll pop along to the kindergarten and find all the little baby words like cat, sat, and mat. You can have those baby words if you want. No, we don't want baby words, we want the good stuff. Exactly, there you go then. And make sure there is a challenge. Here's what also happens. This boy now knows what he needs to work on. He now knows this is where I am, and that's where I need to be. So he goes away and he learns those words. The following day or the following week, he comes back, they all come back, and they take the actual test. And here's what happens. Let's say he goes from 4 out of 10 to 10 out of 10. Now what do we know? We know progress. And in my mind, the right answer to should we praise him is praise progress. Draw attention to progress. What happens in the typical system is we give these tests again and again and again. And it's almost always the same kids every single week who get 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, don't they? It's the same kids. And it's always the same kids who get 6 out of 10. So here's what happens. The kids who get 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10 is bad news. Why is it bad news? Because that becomes part of their ego. My name's James, and I'm a good speller. That's part of who I am. Then, if that becomes the case, they dare not take a risk. Because if you can't spell some words, then what happens? You're not that clever after all, are you? And the kids who get 6 out of 10, 6 out of 10, 6 out of 10 every time, what are they thinking? I can't spell. But it's all right. I'm good at kicking a ball. And they have these defense mechanisms. But what about if that actually, it was one student went from 0 to 6, and another one went from 4 to 10? Progress. That's what we're about, isn't it? Making progress. How many of you put artwork on the walls in your schools? Come on, raise your hands if you put artwork on the walls. I can see you thinking, oh God, he's going to say something's wrong with this now as well. I'm sorry, there is. Get rid of artwork. Hang on a minute. And put twice as much artwork on the walls. Do not just put their final piece of work on the wall. Because you know what? Here, it might be that one of those students was on the challenging path, and they put more effort and time into that piece of work than they'd ever done before, and right next door there was a kid who did it like that just to get it done. And we give them the same amount of focus, the same amount of recognition. What's that saying? It's not the journey that's important, it's just get there. And so it teaches them, just get there however you can get there. So, what we need to do is put their before and after, their beginning and end. Let me show. Here's 2 drawings I did last night just to prove what I mean. Okay, here's 2 I found online. I wish I could find 3 or 4 more examples, but I'm suggesting to you, you put before and after. Even better, before, middle, and after. And with a written description underneath by the student of what they did to move from that point to that point. Because what is it then saying? We love learning. We are here to make progress. Here's another reason for that. How many of you look at this brilliant drawing in the middle and think to yourself, that is amazing, I could never do that? Raise your hands in the air. How many of your students are responding exactly the same way? I could never do that. What a hideous thought to have. When I was 13, I daydreamed through most of school, imagining I would become the new Eric Clapton. I thank you. Do you know how many times I've attempted to play the guitar? 0. Why? Because at the age of 13, my best mate at school was already a brilliant guitarist. And I heard him playing the guitar, and I thought, that is amazing, I could never do that. And honestly, I remember it as if it was yesterday, thinking, it is too late for me. At 13. I was looking at Tony and thinking, your parents bought you a guitar at the age of 4. Obviously, your parents love you much more than my parents love me. You got the guitar at the age of 4, and look at all the development, and look how brilliant you are. It's too late for me. It's disgusting. Imagine if I'd started at 13, I could have been quite good by now. How many of your students are thinking the same? I've never been able to do this. I can't do that. It's too late for me. That's awful thought, isn't it? Dreadful thought. But how does this change it then? Most of us are saying, that's amazing, I could never do that. How many of us are thinking, though, I could have a pretty good go at this first one? Raise your hands in the air if you think, yeah, I could have a good go at that one. And there you go. There's the thing, because you think, I could have a go at that, because that's where he started or she started. So you do that first one, and then you get some brilliant feedback to help you get better, and guess what? The next time, you're a bit better. You get some feedback, get some brilliant ideas, it helps you to move on, and it helps you to move on, and it helps you to move on, and maybe 10 years later, you're actually doing something as brilliant as that one in the middle. I think what we are required, morally required to do, is to emphasize progress. School is not about showing off. It is about improving. It's not about proving, it's about improving. I come to school to learn, to develop, to flourish. I don't come to school to be told I'm not as good as she is. I'm not as good as he is. Even if the teachers aren't saying it, the displays are saying it. The tests are saying it. But if we can change that, so what can we do? Every month, please, get your students to do a piece of work, take it, put it away in a cupboard. Don't do anything with it. But then, a month later, get it out and give it back to them and say, now improve it. Get a different pen and improve it. So that what we are doing is drawing attention to progress. Tests can be really useful if we see them as the starting point, not the end point. If I use a test to work out where is the upper limit of what this student or these students can do so that I can take them beyond that into their zone of proximal development, take them into the pit, really useful. If I use it as, here's what they can do, how does that help? Use tests as a starting point. I hope you found that useful. I'd like to finish by saying I've talked a lot about students yesterday and today. I'd like to finish with one of my favorite quotes, and that is, children are great imitators, so give them something great to imitate. Thank you very much.